This video is brought to you by NVIDIA. Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're taking a look at id Software's newly released Doom: The Dark Ages, and seeing how it stacks up technically to the previous mainline entry to the series from 2020, Doom Eternal. For this comparison, both games are being played on a PC equipped with an RTX 5090 graphics card, and the settings maxed out at their Ultra Nightmare settings at a native 4K resolution, along with high fidelity options like ray tracing enabled. In fact, unlike Eternal, The Dark Ages features native support for ray tracing, and requires ray tracing compatible graphics cards in order to play. Both Doom Eternal and Doom: The Dark Ages also come equipped with NVIDIA's signature AI upscaling solution DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling, that can help to achieve higher average frame rates, even with otherwise demanding graphical effects like ray tracing enabled. Though only The Dark Ages features the newer NVIDIA DLSS 4, which offers much better visual stability compared to the older iterations, while also increasing performance even further than before. This, coupled with the new multi-frame generation feature, allows Doom: The Dark Ages to achieve insanely high frame rates of over 300 frames per second at a 4K resolution. This multi-frame generation is limited to the newer RTX 50 series GPUs, though even with the older 2x frame generation available on RTX 40 series and greater, players can still enjoy solid high-speed performance in The Dark Ages despite its largely improved technical features on offer. I did also capture footage of The Dark Ages with DLSS set to its DLAA mode, like those focused on close-ups of character models and other environmental assets. And most of the additional B-roll footage provided throughout this video will feature frame generation enabled, as I found this to be the best way to maximize performance on my higher refresh rate display. Alright, so let's kick this comparison off by first looking at our character models, starting with the legendary Doomslayer himself. As you can already see, the Slayer has undergone a massive design overhaul, taking the old tight-fitting Space Marine armor from Eternal and reimagining it as a sort of techno-medieval hybrid look. That core silhouette is retained, with a familiar helmet style, open sleeves, and forest green armor paint. But there's considerably more steel incorporated into this new, or rather, given it's a prequel story, old design for the Slayer's armor. Steel spikes are a big part of this new character silhouette, with the spikes on the shoulders, knees, and helmet standing out strongly. The green armor plating along his thighs have been replaced with this worn gray steel as well, limiting that forest green to just the breastplate, shoulder, and parts of the helmet. There's also a lot more of those small details incorporated into this new model, from the scratches and burn marks along the paneling, to the new ammo pouches, chainmail, and leather loincloth. And of course, there's the Slayer's new fur cape that helps to tie his whole medieval-inspired look together, giving him a proper, legendary appearance, well suited for the story being told. On a technical level, it's far more advanced than the old model, with much higher fidelity texture work, superior shaders, and a lot more detail across the board. A common complaint with Eternal was that the stronger mesh lines and exaggerated proportions gave it this almost cartoon-like look and feel, something I believe that the new direction for The Dark Ages circumvents with its more serious tone. This becomes much more evident when we start looking at the various demon designs, that, like the Slayer, look similar at first, but are both aesthetically and technically very different. Take this standard imp for example. The baseline silhouette looks very similar across both games, but that red and blue skin feels more properly integrated now, accenting limbs more strongly in relation to the more complex geometry it's applied to. The poly count in general is also hugely increased here, which can be seen very clearly when looking at the imp's claws, and extra details like hair cards along the arms, back, and head help to enhance the model even further, while still retaining its readability in action. The soldiers aesthetically stand out even further, sharing that same spiked armor style of the Slayer. Narratively, this makes sense, considering the soldiers of Eternal are typically built around being zombified human soldiers from Earth. But even ignoring the clear stylistic difference, the level of detail crammed into these newer models is very apparent, and the reworked proportions help to avoid giving this demon that comically stocky look from before. The same design approach was taken with many of the other demons in Dark Ages as well, as the core silhouette remains in place, but they're totally reimagined to fit with the game's new medieval environments. Some, like the Arachnotrons, feature less of those sci-fi elements from before, dropping the armored legs in place of more natural muscle, skin, and bone, and using more conventional-looking hardware made of brushed steel and spikes, rather than the futuristic-looking laser cannons and other space-based decorations. The plastic tubing synonymous with the classic Cyber Demon design we saw in Eternal doesn't even appear on this new Cyber Demon, and instead, the new Cyber Demon features a large pair of demon wings and a revamped head design that's arguably much more intimidating. Not every demon has seen quite as drastic a change. The Hell Knight in particular looks nearly identical between both games, save for the reworked coloration and some slightly adjusted limb proportions. But again, it does still look significantly better in Dark Ages, thanks to the better material rendering, light interaction, texture quality, and increased poly count. But other demon redesigns are so different that they may be unrecognizable at first. The Revenant has been reimagined as a sort of Grim Reaper, with a black leather hood and cape, and no sign of any of that UAC-inspired sci-fi tech. And the iconic Pinky is no longer a bipedal bull of sorts, and is treated in the Dark Ages as a four-legged mounted beast, with armor paneling that needs to be ripped off to reveal their classic pink skin underneath. And then there's the classic Cacodemon, one of the series' most iconic enemies, that's gone from being a floating, one-eyed red meatball with lots of horns and teeth, to this new hybrid Cacodemon design that features a large exposed brain to make up that rounded silhouette, and long teeth-filled tentacles, a style intended to suit the Dark Ages' new Lovecraftian inspiration. So, in summary, every character model in the Dark Ages has been redone from the ground up, most of which have been purposely designed to suit the game's setting. Though thanks to the newer hardware benefits of current-gen platforms, we see significantly more detail accompanying these designs, offering technically superior models altogether. Next, let's talk about the environments on offer in either game. In Doom Eternal, the game's story takes players through a futuristic invasion of Earth from the demons of Hell, echoing a similar plotline used in the original Doom 2. And while many stages like the Super Gore Nest, the Ark Complex, and the opening Hell on Earth chapters feature the setting, Eternal does also mix things up by transporting the Slayer to a faraway planet or interdimensional realm called Argent Denure, that appears to consist mostly of mountainous, temperate regions with large rounded palaces built of stone and steel. Narratively, this is where the Slayer's legend was born, and is therefore a key part of this reboot saga's exposition. Though, pacing-wise, these locations help to mix up the constant hell-based locations typically associated with the series, and allows for more tonal variety throughout the campaign. The aforementioned Hell chapters are still featured occasionally, as are unique locations like a space-based research station above Mars, and a strange new world called Urdak, home to the Makers. Though most of the game is centered around this Hell on Earth aesthetic, mixed in with the ruins of an ancient mountain-based society, which forms the backbone of the overall game. Fast forward to the Dark Ages, and that latter location takes up a lion's share of the game's setting. Narratively, the Dark Ages shows how the Slayer earned his name during his time fighting on Argent Denure, and so naturally, this location is explored in far greater detail than in Eternal. We also get to see this location closer to its heyday, with the magnificent palaces and nearby villages still standing, and only just being impacted by the invasion of Hell's forces. Players also get plenty of chances to bring the fight directly to Hell itself as well, but there's also a large chunk of the campaign dedicated to exploring a new cosmic realm that delivers a more Lovecraftian setting that stands apart greatly from the rest of the campaign, especially as it likes to play with physics, space, and other constants to keep players on their toes. As far as the design of these locations go, Dark Ages and Eternal's approach to environmental design are very different. Eternal generally restricts players to these very linear paths most of the time, only opening up slightly and distinct combat arena zones, that are generally very vertical and built like parkour obstacle courses. This does give it a very gamey, lighthearted feel, despite the mature subject matter, an intentional design effort done to evoke the feelings of those classic Doom titles. The Dark Ages, however, takes a different approach in evoking that look and feel of classic Doom, in that it scraps the focus on verticality and player mobility in favor of much wider, open spaces. Many levels in the game are even built out to play more open-ended, with multiple objectives spread across a map roughly the size of what you'd expect to see in the Battlefield series, with plenty of unique design aesthetics per zone to help separate out each area. There's plenty of linear paths mixed in too, ensuring the game still retains that focus, but it's a great direction here that I feel does a better job of mixing up the gameplay pacing than the more varied settings on offer in Eternal. Technically, these locations are significantly more detailed as well, with higher fidelity texture maps, greatly improved geometric complexity, and larger draw distances, making wide shots like these feel more impressive. When it comes to lighting these game worlds, Dark Ages also takes a massive step forward technically, thanks to the implementation of full dynamic lighting via ray-traced global illumination, and the support of the returning ray-traced reflections. Doom Eternal in general is a gorgeous game, with some beautifully pre-lit locations that do a fantastic job of conveying a consistent tone throughout, all while still maintaining plenty of readability for that fast-paced flow to the game's combat system. Dynamic lighting effects from projectiles were also key in helping deliver this look, as particles would cause environmental objects to glow as they passed by, adding to that sense of chaos further. Post-launch, Eternal received a patch adding in ray-traced reflections, further improving the quality of the game by allowing a certain amount of environmental textures and lighting to reflect off of surfaces. Things like glowing portals, colorful hell symbols, and other easily identifiable colorful light sources in the world now reflect off of the surface of metal weapon pieces, water surfaces, and other reflective material. The Dark Ages sees that ray-traced reflection technique return here, and it continues to look fantastic, especially when combined with the improved water effects and weapon shader work used on the newer weapons. But it's the global illumination that I feel stands out the most in this latest game, as the game in general has a far darker tone as a result, allowing those dynamic lighting effects from enemy particles and the player's weapons to stand out even further. I believe a big reason why so many people kept referring to Eternal's graphics as feeling cartoony is not just those old school designs for character models and its lighthearted but violent animations, but its generally brighter tone throughout, with even the demonic castles of hell being brightly lit, with very little self-shadowing at play. You'll notice when walking from light to dark areas in Eternal that the weapons will barely be impacted by that lighting, an issue that Dark Ages and its more realistic light calculation does not suffer from. This does mean that the Dark Ages is going to be much darker in general, especially as you navigate those dark caves and secret tunnel networks in some of these interior spaces. But all in all, it's a much more impressive looking lighting direction that goes hand in hand with the darker tone of the character model designs. Next up, we have effects. As mentioned previously, the particle effects in Doom the Dark Ages stand out a great deal this time around, thanks to the darkened environments and improved dynamic lighting effects. But combined with those larger open environments, id Software also opted to increase the particle density a massive amount as well, which contributes to a gigantic increase in the scale of combat, more in line with the large battles featured in the classic Doom 2. Smaller particles like embers from lava pools, smoke effects, and other features are cranked up too. And new weather effects like heavy rain in this opening chapter look especially good, as the rain droplets will interact with the game's lighting very nicely, and even splatter and drip down the Slayer's visor slightly. But I guess this was all to be expected with a new-gen leap for Doom. What I wasn't expecting to see was the added destructible assets in the game world, that, while not necessarily important to the gameplay, look phenomenal when accidentally triggered during intense combat. Wooden huts, wagons, and even the sides of walls will all collapse realistically as you blast away at hordes of demons. Another surprising enhancement here are the game's water effects. The water simulation in the Dark Ages is much more realistic than in Eternal, with more dynamic ripple effects both from demons and the player, the latter of which could not impact the water in Eternal outside of shooting the surface. Fire alphas are also greatly improved in this latest game, with higher quality textures, animation loops, and this heat-simulated post-processing wave that helps to enhance that effect further. Finally, let's wrap up with a quick sound comparison. Here, I wanted to showcase most of the weapons on offer in either game, and how they sound in relation to one another. Most of the guns are not meant to be the same between games, but mechanically they do function similarly. So, what do you guys think? Which weapon do you feel look and sound the best between games? And which game's overall sound design do you prefer? And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, Doom the Dark Ages is a considerable step up technically from its predecessor, with a larger sense of scale, higher fidelity character models, superior environmental assets, and vastly improved visual effects. The lighting is a big standout, building on the already well-implemented ray trace reflections introduced prior by including global illumination, as opposed to the static light map-based direction of Eternal. There's even plans to add path tracing, though this is set to be released via a patch post-launch. As mentioned in my final review for the game, Eternal and Dark Ages play completely different from one another, with one feeling more like a classic Quake game with its heightened maneuverability and fast-paced combat, while this latter title plays more like a classic Doom experience, mixed in with some modern mechanics like parrying. New features like the robot Atlan missions and dragon flying sequences aim to mix up the action further. Personally, the core combat experience of the Dark Ages is where this game truly shines. And combined with the improved graphical fidelity, the Dark Ages is a solid next entry to an already fantastic rebooted collection. But what do you guys think? Are you interested in Doom the Dark Ages? Or do you like the design of Eternal more? Let me know in the comments section. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this posted every week.